Hello everyone. I am Anupama Sharma, Assistant Professor at Jindal Global Law School. I am here to discuss with you the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and this is Module 2. This module will give an understanding of the signing, ratification, interpretation and structure of ICCPR. It will discuss the various procedures recognized under the Covenant. Students, after studying this module, are expected to have an elementary understanding of the text of the Covenant and its scope. Module 1 dealt with the first three parts of the Covenant, which focused on the various rights enshrined in the Covenant. The remaining three parts will be dealt with in this module. However, both Module 1 and Module 2 must be studied in conjunction for proper understanding. Part 4, 5 and 6 of the Covenant elaborates on the structure and formation of the Human Rights Committee along with its role and duties. It also specifies that process of signing and ratifying the Covenant by the state parties and the rules of interpretation of the Covenant for its proper implementation. These parts provide backbone to the rights enshrined in the Covenant. The requirement of the state parties to submit the report detailing the progress of implementation of the rights within their state is a strong measure to monitor the adoption and adaptation of the Covenant. These parts also elaborate upon the procedure for communications filed by one state regarding the non-fulfillment of duties by the other state. Now we will start with Part 4, Articles 28 to 45. This part provides with the structure for the formation of Human Rights Committee HRC, which consists of 18 members. These members are selected through an election process of secret ballot. The nominated candidate have to be national of the state parties, and to ensure their competence in the relevant field, it is provided in the Covenant that the members must have competence in the area of human rights. There is a bar of 2 nominations per state to facilitate equal participation and representation. However, renomination is permissible. The process of election is as follows. It is required that the Secretary General of the United Nations invites the state parties to submit their nomination for membership within 3 months. Such invitation must be sent to the states at least 4 months prior to the date of each election. The list of nominees will then be consolidated by the Secretary General in the alphabetical order along with the state party which nominated the candidate. This list is then circulated with all the state parties at least 1 month prior to the date of election. The election takes place at the UN headquarters, where 2/3 of the state parties to this covenant form the quorum. Those who gather highest number of votes, an absolute majority of the votes of members present and voting. The bar of 2 nominations per state is followed by a bar of 1 member per state while formation of the final committee. This is primarily to ensure the balances of equal representation of geographical distribution and civilization. The tenure for the members of the committee is fixed for 4 years, but 9 members who are chosen by lot by the chairman of the meeting have to leave the committee at the end of 2 years after the first election. In cases of death, resignation, seizure of work by the member, the seat is declared vacant by the Secretary General of the UN. If the tenure of the member is remaining for more than 6 months, then the Secretary General notifies the states to submit the nomination and the procedure for election is followed. The committee is generally required to meet at the headquarters of the United Nations or the United Nations office at Geneva. The committee is given freedom to make its own rules for procedure, but subject to certain conditions as prescribed in Article 39 of the Covenant. The Covenant provides for a mechanism to maintain a review on the progress of the state parties with respect to implementation of the rights enshrined under the Covenant. As per Article 40, each state party is required to submit a report to the Secretary General within 1 year since the Covenant was adopted by the state party. Apart from this, they are required to submit the report as and when the committee demands it. The Secretary General then hands over the reports to the committee, who then studies them. The factors and impediments specified by the state party in implementing the rights under the Covenant are studied and gives comments on the progress of the state. The purpose of such an arrangement has been very aptly explained in the information boxes as provided in the fact sheet on the UN website. I am referring to that explanation as provided on the UN website for your convenience. Purpose and value of reporting process. The process of compiling a report as described provides an opportunity for a state party to clarify in the context of its own national framework the content of its obligations assumed under the Covenant and to take stock of the current situation with respect to Covenant rights, as well as to identify areas that require reform to ensure full compliance with the Covenant. The consultations required with government structures and between government and civil society in order to prepare a thorough report can improve understanding of the Covenant and the objectives of human rights generally. At the same time, publicity surrounding the preparation of a report draws attention to the level of the state's compliance with its obligations and the ways individuals and groups can further contribute to their implementation. The report's consideration by the committee allows for dialogue between the state party and a group of impartial and highly experienced experts, during which areas requiring improvement can be identified and suggestions can be made. Reporting also highlights good practices and lessons learned which may be drawn on by other states as they seek to implement the Covenant. Finally, the outcome of the procedure in the form of concluding observations constitutes an authoritative guide for future legislation, policies, and programs. Although directed at the state party, they can also be used by other stakeholders to encourage implementation and a culture of human rights in the state party. They also serve as a valuable guide to other state parties where similar issues arise. There have been cases where states failed to submit the report on a timely basis, and for a considerable period of time there was no submission from the state's end. In such situations, the committee is rendered unable to monitor the progress in these states. To cater to this problem, the committee in 2001 decided that the committee can examine the record of the state even when there is no report available. This will not be affected even in cases when there is no delegation by the state. The committee then, on the basis of the limited information available, makes a report which is provisional in nature. This report is also sent to the concerned state and may be made public as well. The most important determinant in such action of review, without any report is taken by the committee, is the amount of delay in submitting the report. Communications from other state. Under Article 41, it is up to the prerogative of the state party to give authority to the committee to accept and consider the communications by the other state party over the fulfillment or non-fulfillment of the obligations by the former state. If the state has not made such declaration of giving authority, then no such communication can be received by the committee as per Article 41. It is essential for the state party receiving such communication to respond to it within 3 months. If the matter is not resolved to the satisfaction of both the state parties within 6 months from the initial communication, then either party has the right to refer the matter to the committee. The committee will take over the matter only after ensuring that all the domestic remedies has been exhausted. If the parties are not satisfied with the resolution by the committee, then with the consent of the state parties, an ad hoc conciliation commission may be formed as per the rules provided in Article 42. Now we move on to Part 5. Article 46 to 47 of the Covenant deals with the interpretation of the Covenant and lays down the interpretation of the Covenant that should not impair the Charter of the United Nations as well as the constitution of specialized agencies of various organs of the United Nations. Moreover, Covenant also restricts the interpretation such that it doesn't hamper the free right of the people to enjoy their wealth and resources. We now move on to Part 6, Article 48 to 53, which is the last part of the Covenant, describes the process of signing and ratification of the Covenant by the state parties. The following state can become parties to the Covenant: any state member of the United Nations or of its specialized agency, or state party to the Statute of International Court of Justice, any state party invited by the United Nations to become party to the Covenant. The Covenant is also subject to ratification. Once the instrument of ratification is deposited with the Secretary General, the Covenant enters into force within 3 months from that time. State parties are also allowed to propose amendments to the Covenant, which can be allowed if approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations and if accepted by 2/3 majority of the state parties. The amendments will bind the state parties who have accepted it. The information box on the website summarizes the content very concisely, which I am referring for your convenience. How does a state agree to be bound by the terms of a treaty such as the Covenant and its optional protocols? A state can become party to a treaty in one of the 2 main ways. Firstly, it can sign the treaty, following which, according to the rules of international law, the state may not act contrary to the objects and purposes of the treaty. Signature is followed by ratification. In depositing an instrument of ratification, a state formally indicates its intent to be bound by the treaty. Alternatively, a state can accede to a treaty. Accession, where a state that has not signed a treaty agrees to be bound by it, is equivalent to ratification. The treaty in question typically provides a short period of time after the date of ratification or accession before the state is actually bound by the terms of the treaty. In the case of the covenant, this is 3 months of period. So in this module, we learnt that how ICCPR provisions are actually practically implemented. There is a mechanism to make sure that the states are following it, and there is also a mechanism for states to abide by it by either ratifying it or through accession. There is also a provision wherein the report of states' performance is regularly monitored and suggestions are thereby given. Thank you for listening. That's all for this module.